exposing the secrets behind successful businesses, starts with a simple click. Welcome to Business Diaries.
Right, let's talk about something that sounds incredibly dull, but is, and I cannot stress this enough, surprisingly important, the Producer Price Index, or PPI. Now, I know what you're thinking, oh God, not more economic jargon. And yes, it is a bit jargony. But stick with me, the PPI, put simply, measures the average change over time in the selling prices received by domestic producers for their output. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Think of it like this. It's the price businesses get for the stuff they make or the services they provide. It hits the shops and gets all those fancy retail markups. It's the wholesale price, the factory gate price. It's the cost of the ingredients before the chef, that's us, gets a bill for the ridiculously overpriced artisanal sandwich. So who are these producers we're talking about? It's not just some chap in a shed tinkering with widgets, though he's probably in there somewhere. We're talking about a vast array of industries. Manufacturing, obviously, cars, computers, clothes, biscuits, you name it, but also mining, agriculture, the people growing your spuds and digging up the stuff that makes your phone work. And crucially, it also includes some service industries. So it's a pretty broad church, this producer business. Essentially, if a company is making something or selling a service to another business or for export, the PPI is keeping an eye on the prices they're charging. It's like a massive ongoing survey of what it costs to make the economy tick. Now, what kind of goods and services does this magical PPI actually track? Well, it's quite comprehensive. It looks at the prices of finished goods, which are products ready for sale to the end user, like a brand new washing machine or a lorry. But, and this is key, it also tracks the prices of intermediate goods. These are things that businesses buy to make other things, like flour for a bakery, steel for a car plant, or wood for a furniture maker. And it even goes further back to crude materials, the very basic stuff like raw cotton or iron ore. So it's measuring price changes at various stages of production, giving us a layered view of what's happening to costs throughout the supply chain. And how is this different from that other three-letter acronym you hear about all the time, the CPI or Consumer Price Index? Good question, you astute observer, you. The CPI, as you probably know, measures the prices that the consumers pay for a basket of goods and services. Your weekly shop, your cinema ticket, your rent, that's CPI territory. The PPI, on the other hand, is looking at prices much earlier in the economic food chain. It's what businesses are paying each other. Because of this, changes in the PPI can often be a leading indicator for changes in the CPI. If producers are paying more, guess who's likely to pay more later? Yes, that's right, us. It's the economic equivalent of seeing the mudslide before it hits your house. So, how does this PPI thing actually help us understand inflation? Well, it's a bit like an early warning system, a canary in the economic coal mine, if you will, because the PPI measures prices at the producer level. Any significant and sustained increases there are a pretty strong signal. A signal that businesses are facing higher costs for their raw materials, their energy, their components. And businesses, bless their cotton socks, are generally not in the habit of just absorbing those extra costs out of the goodness of their hearts. No, they tend to pass them on, which means down the line, consumer prices are likely to go up. So, a rising PPI can be a harbinger of future inflation for us regular folk. This is why economists, central bankers and government policy wonks watch the PPI figures like hawks. They scrutinize these numbers every month. Why the obsession? Because it gives them vital intelligence. It helps them gauge underlying inflationary pressures in the economy before they become widespread and start hitting people's pockets directly. If the PPI is showing a steady upward trend, it tells them that inflation might be building up steam. This information is crucial for making decisions about things like interest rates. If they think inflation is getting out of hand, they might decide to raise interest rates to try and cool things down. The PPI is one of their key dashboards, really. Now, imagine the PPI figures are released and they show a persistent, chunky increase month after month. What does that generally mean? It means that the cost of producing goods is on the up. Perhaps oil prices have shot up, or the cost of imported components has risen. As we've said, businesses can only swallow these increased costs for so long. Eventually, to protect their profit margins, they will have to increase the prices they charge to their customers. who might be other businesses or wholesalers or retailers. This ripple effect continues through the supply chain until eventually it reaches the price tag you see in the shop. So a climbing PPI is often the prelude to your wallet feeling a bit lighter. But what if the PPI starts to fall? Surely that's good news, right? Lower prices for everyone, party time? Well, yes and no. A falling PPI can certainly indicate that inflationary pressures are easing. If producers are paying less for their inputs, they might pass on those savings, leading to more stable or even lower consumer prices. That's the upside. However, if the PPI falls too sharply or for too long, it can sometimes be a sign of weak demand in the economy. It could even be a precursor to deflation, a sustained decrease in the general price level. And while falling prices sound appealing, deflation can actually be quite damaging, discouraging spending and investment. So like many things in economics, it's a bit of a balancing act. All right, so it's not just for economists in ivory towers. How do actual real-life businesses use this PPI data in their day-to-day operations? Well, it's incredibly useful for them, particularly when it comes to making pricing decisions. If a company sees that the PPI for its key raw materials or components is rising, it knows that its own production costs are going up. This means their profit margins are getting squeezed, so they might need to increase the prices they charge for their finished goods or services to maintain their profitability. The PPI provides them with objective data to support these decisions and helps them in their financial planning and budgeting. It's a crucial bit of homework. Another important use of PPI for businesses is in something called contract escalation. Now that sounds terribly formal and a bit scary, but the concept is straightforward. Many businesses enter into long-term contracts to supply goods or services. Think about a company that agrees to supply parts to a car manufacturer for the next 5 years. Over that time, the costs of raw materials or labor could change significantly. So these contracts often include clauses that allow the agreed prices to be adjusted based on changes in relevant PPI indices. This helps to ensure that the contract remains fair for both the buyer and the seller, protecting them from unexpected surges in costs or, conversely, significant price drops. Let's think about specific industries that are particularly sensitive to PPI movements. The construction industry is a prime example. Builders rely on a whole host of materials: timber, steel, cement, bricks, copper, glass, you name it. The prices of these commodities can be very volatile. The PPI for construction materials gives building firms an indication of how their input costs are changing. This is vital for them when they're bidding for new projects and for managing their budgets on existing ones. If the PPI for steel skyrockets, you can bet that the cost of that new office block or bridge is going to be affected. It's a constant headache for them, I imagine. Manufacturing is another sector that watches PPI data like a nervous parent. Take car manufacturers, for instance. They use a vast range of components, from steel and aluminium to plastics, rubber, and sophisticated electronics. The PPI will have specific indices for many of these inputs. If the PPI for semiconductors, those tiny little chips that are in everything, goes up, car production costs rise. Similarly, food manufacturers are heavily influenced by the PPI for agricultural products. If the price of wheat, sugar, or cocoa climbs, then the cost of making your bread, biscuits, and chocolate bars will inevitably increase. These industries use PPI to navigate the choppy waters of fluctuating input costs. So, after all this chat about producers, indices, and economic indicators, you might still be wondering, why should an ordinary, decent human being give a fig about the producer price index? It does sound like something that only concerns people who wear suits and talk about fiscal policy for fun. But here's the rub. The PPI, whether you realize it or not, has a direct line to your wallet. Because those costs that producers face, they don't just magically disappear. They often get passed along the chain, eventually influencing the price of your morning coffee, the clothes you buy, the car you drive, and even the cost of your summer holiday. It's an invisible hand, gently but firmly nudging up the prices you pay. Beyond your personal finances, the PPI plays a significant role in how the entire economy is managed. Governments and central banks, like the Bank of England, use PPI data as a key input when they're making some pretty hefty decisions. We're talking about decisions on interest rates, for instance. If the PPI is showing that inflation is really starting to bubble up at the producer level, The central bank might decide it's time to raise interest rates to try and cool the economy down and stop prices from spiraling out of control. And those interest rate changes? They directly affect your mortgage payments, the returns on your savings, and the cost of borrowing for businesses. So it's all connected, you see. Investors also pay close attention to the PPI. For them, it's another piece of the giant, complicated jigsaw puzzle that is the financial market. Movements in the PPI can provide clues about the future profitability of different industries. For example, if the PPI for a specific raw material, let's say copper, is rising sharply, companies that mine and sell copper might see their profits increase. Conversely, companies that use a lot of copper in their products might face squeezed margins. So investors use PPI trends to help them decide which sectors might be a good bet and which ones to perhaps avoid. It helps them try and stay one step ahead of the game. In conclusion then, while the producer price index might not have the glamour of the stock market or the immediate gut punch impact of the unemployment figures, it's a fundamentally important economic indicator. It's a bit of an unsung hero, quietly telling us what's happening to costs before they hit us in the checkout queue. It helps businesses to plan, policymakers to make informed decisions, and investors to navigate the markets. So the next time you hear those three letters, PPI, don't just switch off. Give a little nod of understanding, because now you know it's not just boring data, it's a crucial signal about the health and direction of our economy. And that, believe it or not, is actually quite interesting.